Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour podcast with Amy Wheeler. I've had the good fortune to travel the world learning about yoga therapy on a global scale, and I've been able to meet many of the leaders in the field along the way. I want to share with you what I'm learning as I interview our colleagues from around the world. My hope is that together we can reduce suffering of all sentient beings through our work as yoga teachers and yoga therapists. Today, I have the wonderful opportunity to talk to Leigh Blashki about something really precious. And I feel this is a really sacred conversation that Leigh and I are going to have. It's sacred because he's so open about what it is he's going through. I think so many times we want to project an image, we want to pretend we're doing better than we are, or we have some attachment to being perceived in a particular way. But Leigh is just raw. Leigh is just authentic. Leigh is just real. I've always known him to be that way all the years that I've known him as a friend and as a colleague. When I first met Leigh, I was in awe of him. He had been, president of Yoga Australia. He's considered the father of yoga therapy in Australia. I was on a committee with him, in fact, to help create the grandparenting for the first people to get credentialed at the International Association of Yoga Therapists. So we were in these, pretty long, intense meetings about, how to get people grandparented. And this was, I think even before we had school accreditation. I can't remember what year it was, but Leigh just came as he was. He didn't come with any kind of shield around him. He didn't come with standing on a pedestal and looking down at all of us. I was very new. I was very much younger, probably the youngest person in the room doing the work. And he treated me as an equal. He made sure that I felt heard and seen. He didn't poo-poo me and say, "Oh, you're just this young woman who doesn't know yet. I Leigh Blashki, know." None of that. He was just Leigh. He just showed up without the kavacha, that protective shield that so many people have. And that's what I knew I wanted to be, his lifelong friend. Yoga or no yoga, I was going to be good friends with Leigh Blashki because I wanted to learn how to have that kind of vairagyam, that kind of letting go and surrender, that kind of letting go of the asmita or the identification. I wanted to know his secret for just showing up and being and doing good work and being joyful and letting the rest go. And I feel like in all the years that I've worked with Leigh now, he's been a role model for me to learn how to do that. And he's also been mentoring me in when I might retire. So I'm in my early 50s, and Leigh has already had many, many conversations with me about succession plans, about passing the torch, about how to set my organization up in a way that there will be somebody that may want to take over the work that we collectively, my faculty and I, my husband and I, our team, the work that we've done, maybe someone will want to take it forward. Or not. Maybe the formal program that we've developed will dissolve, but the teachings to the students over the years will continue forward in another form. Either way, Leigh is already helping me to understand that I am not my work. I am not Amy Wheeler, the founder of Optimal State. No, none of it. And it feels so good. It feels so spacious, so light to know that I'm doing great work. I am putting myself out there, but at the same time, it can dissolve in an instant. Poof, gone. And that will be okay too. So this discussion I have with Leigh, it's been a long time coming. He told me he was retiring about 4 years ago, but then somehow he got dragged back in because of all of his wisdom. So many people still wanted to be mentored by him and have him on committees and boards, and he kind of got sucked back in. But I think he's serious this time. And in this podcast, he has so much wisdom to share with us. And I think even for young people, start thinking now about the end and then work backwards. Today, I would like to introduce you to my really close friend and colleague, Leigh Blashki. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Leigh before we get started. Leigh has practiced yoga and meditation since 1968. And he was the founder of the Australian Institute of Yoga Therapy and has trained yoga teachers and yoga therapists since the early 2000s. He's often described as the father of yoga therapy in Australia. And I met Leigh on the board of the IAYT. I think, Leigh, you weren't on the board actually, but I was, and we were on some committees together. So welcome, Leigh. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you very much. And I couldn't think of a better and more enjoyable podcast to be on than yours. And as you say, I regard you likewise as one of my closest and beloved friends. In fact, we met initially in 2014, just before the committee worked together. I think we actually met in the foyer of the Arboretum Hotel in Austin, and you were all in a flat trying to get your paperwork together for your accreditation. And so, I remember that well, thinking, wow, this lady's really got things together. You know, it just came across the energy. It was powerful. And I heard of you, of course, from your work in the organization.
I'm not sure in that moment of going for accreditation with our yoga therapy school, I had it together. In fact, I think that was one of my worst moments in life, but I'm glad that our friendship blossomed even after that kind of shaky beginning. So, Leigh, we have you here today. I had considered saying, Leigh, you don't need to come on the podcast. And you said, no, this would be a great kind of closure or at least stepping into a new door because you have decided to move towards the retirement phase of your life after how many decades of being of service to the yoga world. And I just consider it such an honor that you're willing to talk to us about this because it's clearly very emotional to come to this place where you're making this decision to kind of maybe withdraw from your professional life quite so much.
You're trying your best to bring the tears forward. If they come, they will come. Let them come. Yeah, look, as you say, it's not an easy. Well, the decision to make a change is possibly for me was the easiest part. It's really managing the change and then reflecting upon, am I really changing? Is it just an outward change? Or is it an inward change? And I started making the outward change 2 or 3 years ago. I've always believed in not holding on to things too long. I've had succession plans for everything I've done, basically. And so I started letting go. In fact, it was the end of 2017. So it's close to 4 years, and I actually started this process of letting go. But it wasn't until this year when I really started studying a bit more deeply into what is retirement about in the yogic tradition. And I'd used the word vanaplasta previously, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But it didn't really sink in until some deep reflections, some things that were occurring within the yoga and meditation communities, which I don't need to mention, and the whole COVID era, when there's so many people who are home and so much communication online. For some reason, all of that brought it to a head, along with a number of health challenges. And I don't want to labor on those too much, but ongoing health issues associated with my heart. I call with heart conditions, and I have a sort of behind the scenes atrial fibrillation that can come and go, and I'm medicated for that. And I've had 4 heart surgeries in my life, and going way back as early as 1959. There's just stuff, I've got a thing called MGUS, which is monoclonal gammopathy of unknown significance, which can grumble along and not be too problematic. But unfortunately, it always progresses. And if you live long enough, it will progress into a nasty cancer. But hopefully, I'll outlive. So my years will finish before it progresses. So there's all these little things behind the scenes, and all of which add to a form of complex PTSD, which is based on continually being triggered. Because when you've had health issues from day one in your life, and I didn't become really aware of this till recent years, how much the trauma has just become embedded in particularly my body as well as my mind. So everything that arises becomes a trigger. And I found that even my involvements, the small amounts of involvement in the work life, even though I'd formally retired from seeing clients and training people, etc., some years ago, I was helping on committees, as you know, for various things, and mentoring people and supervising people. They're like hooks that would draw me back in to the fullness. I couldn't go half in, half out. Some people can. They can just be completely detached. Their vairagyam is much more developed than mine, obviously, and they can just do these little things and just not get pulled in. And the pulling in, unfortunately, added to the sense of trauma for some reason. And I have my suspicions, which I won't go into in this podcast, as to some of the emotional things that might have been at play. And you and I have discussed that at different times in our chats together. So that's a long way of saying I've come around to this state of vanaprastha, which really is a form of sort of retirement in yogic life, but not quite the same as retirement in what we might regard as retirement in the Western world, where you go off and take tours of Europe, or go play golf and not much else. In vanaprastha, the person is still an active yogi in a way that in fact there's the deeper work starts, where time is dedicated. Officially, vanaprastha is like going into the forest and having time to contemplate your navel. Well, nowadays, unfortunately, I do have forests near me, as you do, and I do have a lovely property, and I can sit outdoors and be with nature and do this inner work, do the really deep sadhya, which for me is when you've got the space to do it. There's no hiding. There's nowhere to hide. And by holding on to those hooks of I'll still write this book, or I'll still do this, or I'll still do that for this organisation. For me anyway, others might be different. They give me a place to hide away and not have to face what are sometimes discomforts in the sadhya. This is about looking back of a life, looking forward to whatever's left of a life, to considering what this means in the broader sense of yoga philosophy. It's a very deep process, and it even touches a little bit onto the sannyasa, which is where we sort of really let go of things. It's a renunciate stage. Well, I feel myself renouncing a lot of things, particularly things that I have carried around in my own headspace, related to so many things, and now is the time and space to do that. And what I'd love to share with your wonderful followers and listeners is that this is not just a rare thing. This is something we can plan for as part of our yogic journey. And Amy, you and I have discussed this about how it might apply to you and others. And this is something to aspire to in a way for me in the yogic sense. It's not just, I'll be a teacher until I can no longer open my mouth or take a breath. This is a powerful part of the journey, and it's an important part in my understanding. To let go of the need to have to be still somebody's teacher. And for a lot of people, and I know I was certainly one of the ones that I needed to be needed as a teacher. And that was more baggage, and I'm learning to step back from all of that and disidentify from having been a yoga teacher. I'm just me, but it's still part of the yogic path. And that's a lovely thing, because it's like, welcome. You're getting close to 70 years of age. Welcome to your life without all that stuff that you thought you had to maintain. And I know people will be hearing this thinking, oh my gosh, there's something that's jingling at my nerves here. There's something true. And just about everyone I speak with about this think, oh, I'm having the grumblings of these thoughts behind the scenes as well. So, yeah, that's where I'm situated, and blessed to be here in so many ways.
Well, first of all, thank you for being so open about your health concerns, and those emotional hooks that tend to trigger health concerns when you're on a committee or writing a book chapter or on a webinar, or all these things that you do so well. I just think so many times as yogis, we think, well, if I do everything right and I meditate every day and I do my asana and I eat well and I sleep well, that we're not going to get old, we're not going to get sick, and nothing bad is ever going to happen to us. And then we have this weird feeling that when a health concern comes up, that somehow we have to hide it. We have to pretend it isn't there. We don't want anybody to know about it, because that might mean that we're not a great yogi or yoga practitioner. And I just think that's total BS. We are all going to get old and get sick and die. It doesn't matter how many asanas and pieces of broccoli we eat. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yes. I, like a lot of people who started yoga late 60s, early 70s, in that halcyon era of, well, let's just say it's the late 60s and the 70s. You don't have to describe it much more. The old saying, if you say you remember it, you weren't actually there. But that's what it was like. Yoga was all about this. We're going to be invincible. We've got the magic thing now, and there's a little bit of hubris that goes with that. I suspect I had a tiny bit of that for a while there in the early days. Saw lots of people who did, and still see people who carry that around. And that's not to be judgmental. It's people are where they're at. But we are just people. And being a yoga practitioner or teacher or devotee or whatever does not make us immune from our humanity. In fact, I would make the case, and this is something that my dear friend and teacher Richard Miller has said many times, our humanness, our authentic humanness is really a mark of our yoga in practice. And I know Sri Desikachar said similar sorts of things over the years, and how we relate to people. And so, yeah, it's coming home to being authentically human, unattached, disidentified from labels of any sort. Now, I can't say I'm completely free. I still have some, no doubt, but I'm certainly trying very hard to release them. And I'm fortunate to be able to have friends like yourself and others that I can be open, totally honest with, and have a cry if I need to. And I'm also, again, a bit of other self-disclosure. I'm part of a 12-step fellowship, Emotions Anonymous, where we come together in meetings and share the deepest stuff about our emotional well-being and our how we're progressing in our experiences. And there's a lot of people there with complex PTSD and generalized anxiety disorder and other things that I can relate to. And so we help each other that way. But we're all human. Sorry, my dog's trying to get in the door. And to be with people who are just human beings, I just wonder what it would be like if yoga teachers would start each class, each yoga therapy session, each meditation session with just a coming to the recognition of our humanity, just being human. and some people do. I think there's a need for more of that. And I think people can be a little bit attached to the accoutrements of the yoga class, and that might sound sort of paradoxical when you've got a picture of Krishna and Radha behind me and things like that. But I just happened to like it, and it was a wedding present from a dear friend. But it's not about, how we decorate things up and how we dress and how many crystals we have in our room. Can we as yoga teachers sit, stand, be with our students in total authenticity? And I don't know that I probably could have in my early days, because the work hadn't been done to find that out. I was still enmeshed in these attachments to the role and what that meant for me. There was this element of my identification was with this role, and I've shared with you and others on other occasions. I'm happy to share it now. Part of the reason it took me a little while to come to this stage, and 3.5 years to get to the stage where I could really say, I'm putting it all out, is that I felt afraid that if I let go of this stuff, where would I be? So I was actually completely scared of what would happen to me, and if I didn't have all these attachments of Leigh's the yoga teacher, and Leigh's known for being involved in this organisation and that one, and that's how people know me, and will they still want me? Will they still love me? All that stuff. And it took some bravery, and okay, I was slow at it. Others are much better at that. But that's just my stuff. It took me a little while. And again, others might be able to relate to this. This is why I'm sharing these things. Others might be hearing this who have been practicing for many years or thinking about what's next. That we don't need to be afraid, because if whatever is there after letting go is meant to be there, and if someone is meant to be a friend after we're no longer their teacher or their mentor, they will be. And the ones that don't want to be, time to move on.
I am so happy that you're willing to put all of this out there, because there are so many people considering retirement right now, and so many of us that are already planning for, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And like for me, hearing it in my 50s, I want to create in my life the depth of relationships that if I never taught another yoga class again, whoever I'm in connection with might still love me anyway. If I decided to throw yoga out the window and go into painting or dog training, that they would still call me on my birthday. And I think that's what you have done with the authenticity, with the heart, with the love. The yoga is almost irrelevant, at least in my relationship with you. The yoga is almost irrelevant, which is so strange to say. It's Leigh, it's the heart of Leigh that I care about and want to be in connection with. I don't care about the yoga anymore. Maybe at first when we met, yes, we were on this committee, we were doing all this yoga stuff. But as I told you a few weeks ago when we were talking about this, Leigh, our relationship isn't going to change at all. I'm not here because I want anything from you. And because you're the father of yoga therapy in Australia, like, who cares? So, but it sounds to me like that was kind of maybe a scary thing to ponder, that what if nobody cared anymore? What if nobody wanted to be in connection anymore when you weren't having a position of power or prestige?
And you have to say, and this is not just about you and I stroking each other's back, but when you had said what you'd said a few weeks ago, and another dear colleague, I won't mention the name, but I think it's fair, in the United States said something similar, and others in our little Sangha had said things, and a couple of other people I spoke with on the phone, all within a week of each other, said almost the same thing as you just said. That was the final piece of the jigsaw for me. And I will be forever grateful to my last breath to you and others for sharing that. And I hope you know that it's completely mutual. And good on you for thinking about this. You say you're very early 50s and just already having a good think about this. But this is why it's important, I think, for what has hitherto been sort of a little arcane and sort of unspoken about. Like, people have to come out and talk about these things. That to me, that's part of my responsibility to say, well, don't be afraid of this. There is another stage. It's not just something you read in a text and it's all very special and you go to the forest and chant certain mantras and Vedas. It's not about that in any way. It can be for some who's that's authentic to their tradition. And we've got to think about our cultural appropriation, misappropriation in all of this. So I'm mindful of anybody from the particularly the Hindu-based culture who might be hearing this. I'm in no way trying to make claim that's I'm an expert in the Varnashra Dharma, which is this 4 stages of life, but enough to at least say, well, I can see how those things inform this stage of life for me. If people feel upset with me saying I'm in the Vanaprastha stage, I do apologise, but I don't know of a better term. So I'm just using it because it seems to be a term that's the closest fit.
Yeah, like the first stage of life is more the student phase, and then we move into the householder phase, and then retirement, and then renunciation, right?
Between retirement and renunciation. And I guess that's where the shift was for me the last few weeks was I got a sense of a bit more renunciation coming into this. And it's funny, when you mentioned about people's titles and things, for some reason I was going through a folder of mine on my computer. I'm doing a bit of a cleanup of the computer. It's another thing, letting go. I've deleted huge numbers of files. And I found some biogs. I kept all these biogs going back for 10, 15 years. Why? Had they go into the delete box, into the recycling bin and cleared away? I don't need to sit on all these things in my computer just to remind myself of what it was. So the letting go is a slow and gradual process, and it will take some time, but it can be joyful. Because every time you let go of a layer, it's as though a little bit of extra light is allowed in.
And Leigh, I just have to ask, I've been wanting to ask you this privately, but I might as well do it right here, right now. Who are you finding that you are without the titles and the images and the power and the prestige and the committee assignments and the boardships? And like, who are you? Do you know yet?
I guess that's, no, not fully. That's work in progress. Because and I read to you that poem from A.A. Milne, and I won't read it now, in our time is precious, but if anybody's interested, A.A. Milne, the author of Christopher Robin and Pooh Bear and all that sort of thing, in a book called When We Were Very Young, has a story called Mr. Botany, or Plain Mr. Botany B, or Sir Brian, Mr. Botany, I can't remember the exact title. But if you've got that, if you want to look it up, it's a lovely story about this man who had this title and power, and he was so attached to it. And then one day he woke up and realised, it's not me. And then the townsfolk who used to fear him and hate him, and then the townsfolk helped him along by saying, we're going to wash you, we're going to put you in the pond and wash you and dunk you, and you're going to be reborn as just plain, he was Sir Brian, and now he's going to be plain Mr. Botany B. And I guess that's who I'm finding now, is the plain Leigh Blashki, who doesn't have to be anyone. When I go down to the men's shed to do some carpentry, which I hope I'll get back to when lockdown's finished, I'm just one of the men there who knows probably less about what I'm doing than anybody there. When I sit in the Emotions Anonymous meetings and sit in the co-sponsorship I have with somebody, I'm just a person who's got a particular emotion to talk about that day. And when I sit with my friends in our Sangha, I just talk about what's going on with family and friends and our lives. It's through that I'll find out who I am. And I'll probably find out that I don't actually have to find out. John Kabat-Zinn's wonderful saying, wherever you go, there you are. And I know here I am, but because the layers that have been shed, it's fairly recent, there's still a little bit more to know, and there's that more time to sit. And this is why it's the beginning of a phase of life. There's a lot more sort of sitting in my forest, so to speak, and finding out and not running away from it, and coming face to face with some fairly serious discomforts, I have to say. Because I can't run away from my anxieties. When I have a PTSD trigger, I'm learning to lean into it and listening to it, and not being afraid of it. Step by step, it's slow progress. And I'm thankful for the people who have become my new teachers in a way. I've gone back to, in a way, I've almost gone back to brahmacharya, to the studentships phase of life. I've got all these new teachers because I've got the time and space to listen to wonderful online courses. Peter Levine, people know Peter Levine, wonderful work on trauma, and of course, somatic experiencing and things he said on his online course. Just, wow, another piece fell into place, another piece of the jigsaw. That's so true about my trauma. And that becomes validated because for years, decades, I didn't even recognize the compounded trauma that I was carrying in my life. It had never been resolved from early days, and that was being re-triggered time and time again, because every decade there's been lots of health issues, and because the last 5 years there's been many of them. But that they were unacknowledged by anybody, by my family, myself, even some medical practitioners. Was sort of, I have to talk to them about it and say, look, you realise I've got complex trauma. And then they will sort of back, I don't know what I can prescribe for that. So there's an element of, unfortunately, I have a very, very good and understanding psychotherapist who I see every so often, and wonderful friends like you who get it. So it's allowing the time and space to face up to all the things that have held me back for being at home with myself. And for me, it's trauma, lots of it. And I don't want to be just seen as, oh, I'm a person dealing with trauma. I've got a lot more going on than that, and I'm thankful for it. And I have a charmed and blessed life, albeit with some health stuff going on. But I've got to get through that phase. It's another little doorway to go through to get to the next place. Now trauma isn't front of mind for me because I've got some stuff. I've got strategies. Now I can say, well, now who is here now? But I've let go of Leigh. So there was Leigh, the yoga teacher, and there's the Leigh, the mentor. Then there was Leigh, the person with all these health problems and the associated traumas. So I've even got to let go of that one. So that's my next phase of letting go. So, and I'm working very hard on that to say, well, there's more than that, And so getting to know oneself. I don't know how people get to do this in a lifetime. It's like, okay, some of us are lucky enough to have our Walden Pond, but not everybody does. And hopefully people understand Walden Pond. If not, I'm sure, Amy, you could post some link to them to help with that.
Oh, Leigh, there's just so much goodness in what you're saying. When you were talking, I was thinking of how we spend so much time learning the philosophy of yoga in order to have a framework for our lives so that our lives make sense and we can make it through the world. The yoga teachings are like a handbook for daily living, but there comes a point where we almost become so intertwined and attached with that handbook that we start running on autopilot, blurting out yoga sutras at every moment to our family's dismay. And then to think like, oh, I have to let go of the handbook, and I have to even let go of that framework in my mind of when this happens, Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, like picking, like dismantling all that to see what's left, only to find, in your case, trauma that maybe had even been covered up by so much great work in the world that you are doing, so much seva. So now you're sitting with yourself, feeling what's really in there, realizing that there's even an attachment to the health problems and the trauma, and how do you move into being the new version of you, letting go and of that even. I mean, it's really remarkable to see. It's like layers of the onion.
Wanted to, I suppose I could say, well, okay, this is my purpose, and my whole raison d'etre is to try and brush the horse understand them. I mean, that's what I'm trying to reside in, that true nature. And I could look at any of these things and say, there's that sutra at play, but they're not. I didn't have to bring the sutra in to start that process. I just say, as you beautifully said, it just becomes, it's the cellular part of our mind, body, spirit existence is just so imbued with that particular software. And that's the beauty of it. And so it's not like we're letting go of these things. And I don't do a lot of chanting nowadays. I do occasionally do some Gayatri. I love it. And you know, my practices are what they need to be. And I remember saying to my psychologist some months ago, and there'll be some people here listening saying, heresy. I said, you know, I get up some days and I look at my mat and I feel this tension building. I don't want to do my practice today, you know, and I know it's a nice practice for me. It limbs my joints. It's you know, it's a lovely thing. It's like my own version of Pavamuktasana, something worked on actually with, the name will come to me in a minute. And she said, well, why do you have to do that every day? And I said, well, then I heard myself about to say, well, yoga tradition, practice, you know, and all that sort of stuff. But sometimes our abhyasa is to not do, is to recognize that at the moment I'll stand and watch the sunrise, or I'll do a little prayer to my concept of universal consciousness, my Ishvara, which I call higher power, which is a term a lot of 12-step people use. And then at some stage in the day, later on, I tend to come back and do my little practice because the body's done some stuff. It's had a walk. It now needs a little limbering. And then I do that and might do some pranayama. I may not do some pranayama, you know. And I get a bit excited when I do a salutation. You know, I take a long, slow salutation. It takes me 5 or 10 minutes to do one salutation. Very slow, very deliberate, and lots of timing. Wow, that was exciting. I haven't done one of those for a week or 2 or 3. And I did a salutation. I get exciting. But you know, 10 years ago, I would have been still stuck in that thing of, well, you've got to have done a certain number of asana each day, and certainly I've got to have done some pranayama and meditation. And, well, I'm letting life be the practice. And for me, life is not just a word, it's an acronym. Let it flow easily. L-I-F-E. And that's then being kind to myself. And when I'm kind to myself, I'm then going to be kind to others, to my wife, to my pets, to my other family, to my friends, to the world in general. Because doggedness, and I've had my share of doggedness, you know, I tended towards compulsion. In fact, at the age of 12, I was hospitalized with OCD. It just has no place in the authentic journey of yoga. Thankfully, a lot of newer teachers are getting this. They're more tuned, and they maybe because their teachers are people like you and others, and Anne and people like this who have just had so much of a journey, and they get it, and they're more in tune. But I had the teachers initially who were the old school, you know, get you in Padmasana and stand on your knees and force you to do certain things, and you know, that was the way it was when you were taught in the early 70s.
Well, I remember a few years ago, you know, when I was learning chapter 4 of the Yoga Sutra, and it was such a surprise to me that the way of the yogi is to let go of everything, to have vairagyam, that total detachment, even from your practice, from being a yogi, from the image you have of yourself, from the doggedness, from like at some point we are going to let go of every single piece of it. And we can either hold on tightly and get kind of dragged, or we can start 20 years beforehand, just letting the dove fly out of the hand on a regular basis. And so because of my friendship with you, even at my early 50s, I'm already saying if my yoga therapy school gets taken away for whatever reason, COVID or my health or whatever, I'm okay with that. If I no longer teach yoga because the universe decides something different for me, I'm okay with that. Now, I don't know if I really am, but I'm telling myself that as a result of being in friendship with you.
And I think what you highlight there, Amy, and thank you. I'm pleased and my heart is warmed by having any positive influence in that regard. But for everybody who's a yoga teacher listening, that don't be afraid to make these plans early. Maybe not when you're just out of teacher training, but when you've been involved in teaching yoga for a period of time, have a succession plan. I mean, because life coaches and business coaches talk about these things, of course, as well. But succession plan isn't just about what's going to happen to my business. Will I sell to somebody? Will I pass it on? Will I go and write a book? Or will I make lovely, yoga cards like Amy Weintraub? There's some lovely things that people can do. But that plan, succession for my life as a practitioner, as a sadhak, as a practitioner of yoga, that's what I think people forget about in their succession planning. That it's okay to know that you can step back and that a little space doesn't hurt. And you think about the role of a yoga teacher. It can be quite intense at times. It's a beautiful thing to teach, but we're dealing with people who are very open a lot of the time, or there's stuff they bring into the yoga Charlotte, into the room, and especially we're doing one-on-one work with people. I mean, it's great intensity. And it's similar to, as a professor at a university, the role of teaching people in whether it be primary, secondary, or tertiary education. There's work, but people in teaching professions at schools and higher education, etc., tend to get long service leave or sabbaticals and all these sorts of things. But how often does the yoga teacher do that? Oh, we took a holiday during the summer break, and so we didn't teach classes for 4 weeks. It's not enough for most people. There are times for most people, some might be different, where you just need that almost like 4 seasons away from it all. And to have that real sabbatical. And sabbatical comes from the word shevet or sheva in Hebrew, which means 7, and which is the same word for Sabbath, which is the 7th day. So every 7 years, sabbatical is every 7 years, officially. Now, most yoga teachers can't afford to do that, but at least some sense of sabbatical. I didn't do it. I mean, I suppose I did a little bit, but not really, not mentally. And it's very tiring, as you well know. Over some decades, you think, oh my God, I wouldn't mind a break. And I was speaking to a very dear colleague and friend just a few days ago. She may well be listening to this. In fact, I'm pretty sure she is. So I won't mention her name. You know who I'm talking about. We chat about these things quite a bit. And she was so relieved to hear these, that it's okay to let go, and she's tired and has this deep tiredness from the work, and it doesn't matter how many years. This could happen in 5 or 10 years if you feel this and you need that break. Okay, you may not go to Vanaprastha, but you may say, I'm going to take a sabbatical.
Leigh, I think what you're saying is so true, that even if we can take a month off, our mind is still hooked in, and we know at about 3 weeks we're going to have to re-enter the rat race. It's really in academia, it's so nice with a tenured professor, they literally can go away for a year. Now they're still working, but there's at least a time to de-link, to not be linked, and then time to come back in. That's just something that most yoga teachers can't afford, as you said. But one other thing that you've been talking about that I think is so important to prepare, or at least I see it as, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is having activities and people and friends that don't give a rat's butt about yoga, that are not interested in yoga, that don't want to hear about yoga, that don't see you through the lens of yoga, they like you because you're Leigh, the guy who bakes great sourdough bread. What do you think of that?
Yes, another piece of Amy Wheeler wisdom. Yes, absolutely the case. Very important. And I didn't have a lot of that, I have to say. And I've got more of it now. I'm very fortunate to have my beloved wife, Heather, is great at that. And she was a yoga teacher for over 20 years. When she let it go absolutely and completely. And she is one of those people who, as you say, doesn't give a rat's butt about yoga. And if I say I've just had a chat with somebody, was that yoga? Oh, okay. I'm just like, don't want to engage in that particularly. And you know, she found something else that was her next phase, which is great. But the other thing, which I guess was a corollary to what I said before, was that when we do step back and have, even if it's our 4-week summer break or we have a bit of a sabbatical, and we start to question whether we still want to be a yoga teacher, that's okay too. Nothing's saying that it's a sin to turn our back and say, we've done that for 10, 20 years, 30 years. I want to do something different now. That's okay. People can make their changes. It's not the end of the world. And I probably would have been afraid to do that years ago. And I don't know if I ever stopped and make that reflection. In some respects, I did, where I made the choice to stop teaching any sort of formal asana-based classes and really just fell back into more meditation teaching and one-on-one work, because I realised I didn't want to be a person who came along and rolled out 10 mats twice a week in a community hall. And I was getting no joy, and therefore I was not being honest with myself and my students. So we can make changes in our directions, and sometimes that can be letting go and something new comes in. But that's still being a yoga shadak, because we're being authentic. And as you clearly say, this is a big part of what that fourth pada is about in the sutras.
So as you de-link from your responsibilities, from the image of who we've all known you to be, from the possibly even workaholism that comes along with most of us that are yoga people, like, how do you see your days unfolding? Like, you're going to spend time going deep into your own practice and into your own heart, but do you have any conception of what that looks like for a day?
Well, as I said earlier, this is work in progress. And I have to keep reminding myself of that acronym, let it flow easily, because I still have that thing of the diary, and, old-fashioned person, I have a hand diary rather than an iCalendar. It's quite structured. My day is structured, and I'm bit by bit over the last only matter of weeks or months starting to let go of that a little bit. There are certain things that need to occur. And dog needs to be walked in the morning and fed, and I have to be fed, and I like to do a little exercise. But even then, I'm being less dogged and rigid with that, because I want to see what it's like to have less structure in my day. Then I'll know what the structure is. And I know myself as a person, and I don't think that my operating system is going to change dramatically in the next however many years I've got left, to be a person who's just throws it all to the wind and doesn't have a little bit of organisation. That's just not me. But I can do a heck of a lot less, because there is that tendency to be a little bit compulsive with those things. And I just don't know what it's going to be like. I do know, if I look at today as an example, that's all I can do is look at yesterday and today and take it day at a time. But, I walk the dog, and I make some breakfast, and I have a nice slow breakfast, which takes a couple of hours. I have a little bit and have a little bit more. And some grazing with my breakfast, and I'll check out what needs to happen. And I just look outdoors and realise I haven't watered some seedlings that are going to need it today. So little things like that will remind me when I go outside, do those little things that just need to happen around a household. And then I might listen to Peter Levine some more, and then I'll do a little exercise. And who knows what I might do next? I just don't know. I'm going to go to an EA meeting straight after this, because I love the people in that particular group. I've got a new car I've got to prepare for, that's coming in about 3 weeks' time. So there's a little bit of excitement in my life there. Yet all of it is starts with the place of stopping and listening. So before I do it, I will stop and listen. What's next? What needs to happen? And then sometimes it'll be, I actually feel tired. Just having yesterday, I felt tired at this time of day, and I went and had a nap. Lay down and had a nap. It's lovely. And then usually in the afternoon I'll have a nap anyway, which is I usually do a bit of a yoga nidra and let myself nap off. And then I'm letting life itself dictate what is meant to happen. And so in a way, I look forward to the periods of nothingness to be done, but at the same time I don't look forward to them, because they're the scary places where I can become a bit ruminative and start to question, shouldn't I be doing something now? Shouldn't I be active? Look, that lawn needs mowing. Or if you don't feel like it need doing something now, start with not doing. Because for me, life has always been, as far back as I can remember, that the default place was the doing, and then you would superimpose upon that some non-doing as a bit of relief. So the change now is start with the non-doing and superimpose upon that some doing. And even now, as I say this, and as I've reflected upon this in recent weeks, I think, well, as a result of this, might I have some richness to share with others? Let that go. Yes, I might. I may well. I don't know. But I've got to let that go. And that's why this particular podcast, and I know we should be watching the time, this podcast is to some extent a swan song. This is a letting go. It's a fond farewell to the public life in yoga. Whether something else pops up later on, I just don't know. And I don't think it's wise for me to even think about it. It's just, live my life and know that I'm still true to the practice of yoga in doing so.
It's reminding me of Ram Dass and the idea of just be here now in every moment. Be here now, with no expectations of what might happen as a result of any of your actions, no manipulating. I had a time, I took a 6-week, actually it was a 7-month sabbatical, but the 6 weeks of it, I went to Maui and I was alone for 6 weeks. And I decided that I was going to do exactly what you just described, which is I'm going to wake up and in each moment, I will do what I feel like doing. I'll have no idea what the day will hold, but I'll just ask myself, what do I need now? How do I feel now? What would I like now? And it was the best 6 weeks of my life. I'm not even kidding. Now, I knew it would come to an end, so that wasn't a permanent state, but is there joy in it, Leigh, to just have that much spaciousness? And for me, it was such a creative process. I felt very connected to myself. I felt I could listen to myself and my intuition. I found it so joyful. And yet I hear you saying it's also a little scary.
Well, that's based upon my own mind and my own emotional makeup and mental makeup. That I spent so long finding ways of avoiding uncomfortable ruminative thoughts that but I know I have to sit with them, and at times I sit with them and they're fine. And of course, we all know that when we face those things, they're nowhere near as scary as they might be. And you mentioned about going to Maui. I was saying to Heather just a few weeks ago, when she was saying, "How are you feeling lately?" I said, "Well, gradually progressing and getting a little better all the time." And we both agreed that I was at my best when we travelled for about 5 or 6 weeks in 2019 for her special birthday. I wouldn't be so rude to mention any particular decade of my wife's birthdays publicly. And we took a tour through the UK where she was born. So we hired the car and we drove around, and we had our phone. And we were planning sometimes only a day or two in advance, the Airbnb. But it was exactly that. You get up in the morning, we've got food in the house. Oh, no, we better go down to the grocery store. Oh, where are we going now? Well, let's go up that way and we might be able to get to Scotland tomorrow night. And oh, we'll stop somewhere on the way. Okay, we'll see how far we want to stop there. We'll stop for lunch. And just free and easy and had a wonderful time, of course. But that was actually the starting point of me realizing that you've got to have days where you've got to throw it to the wind and trust. And this comes back to this trust thing again. I'm not a good truster because I've not been able to trust parts of myself in terms of my body. I haven't been able to trust it all my life. And so trust has been an issue for me. So to be able to trust that life will just unfold is a big one. And that we can feel okay with that. And that if we don't trust, all we're doing is holding on.
You know, my dad is going through some pretty major health issues also. I'm just amazed at his ability to trust. And if today's the last day, all right, so be it. You know, like it, to the point where I'm kind of unnerved by it, as you know. But I think that's a beautiful thing, to just be able to be with the day as it is and be joyful with the day in front of us, and just not look too far ahead, not overthink, not ruminate too much, not plan too much, just allow ourselves to be. I mean, it sounds easy, but what I'm gathering from this conversation is it's actually challenging to allow yourself to just be.
Yes, and I think that's a small number of people I've spoken with about this who are contemplating, their movement towards Vanaprastha or some form of retirement. A number of them have actually said that it's a little daunting, it's what to expect, and have they had role models about it? And that's another part of it too, that if you've had good role models, that helps. And I don't know whether I can be a role model to anybody in relation to this, no idea. But I know I did have some role models. I was fortunate enough to have my parents did have a productive retirement time. There was not a yogic journey, but my father had a different spiritual path, and they were good role models of that you can have a healthy time letting go and living day to day, and yet making plans when they needed to. They planned their holidays and did all the things. But there's not a huge number of role models in the yogic world of this, yeah.
Can I tell you my opinion on that? And granted, I'm young and I may be eating these words one day, but I think I'm seeing too many people hold on far too long to the householder phase and the responsibilities and the committees. And I just want to say, allow yourself some joy and fun and space. And if you can afford to, I mean, I think that's a privilege, right? That a lot of people don't have. But if one can afford to go into Vanaprastha and sannyasa, I would love to see more yoga people doing that. It's almost like in the yoga world, we are not even following our own teachings, and we're working far too long into our late 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Glad you said that, Amy, and there's so many truths there, and it would be good to have more people who could be those role models of how you let go, and so people can see and they can ask questions of them. But the people who have been around for long periods of time are still highly active with various things. And okay, yes, they may not be teaching, but they're out going to lectures and keynoting and writing books, and not saying they shouldn't do those things. And that, in fact, Vanaprastha, writing a book and doing those sorts of things and podcasts can be a valuable part of it. But as long as there's still that sense of that they're not attached, or they're working on that vairagyam, and that really letting go of that, I'm not teaching these things anymore, but I'm still that same person because I'm writing a book. It's they can be hooks.
What do you think? This will be my last question because I know I've had you here a long time. What do you think of finding something totally different. Like I imagine in 20 years, I'll have a farm with a bunch of animals that don't give a crap about who Amy Wheeler is, except that she brings them food. A kind of a rescue farm. What do you think of just like delinking from yoga and just going into something totally different where people don't know you, they don't have an image of you, or don't care to know you? Do you think that's a good idea, or is that not really what Vanaprastha is?
Well, I think each person needs to find out based on their own true, authentic nature. For me, I think that is important for me to do that, to be well occupied. But I know that I can't just force myself into it. I've got to go through that dark space of emptiness first, as challenging as it is. And I'm in the middle of that at the moment. But yes, there are things that I dream of. And, I would like to think of, a place where my garden, I've got a garden here, but I can't always do all the work I want to on it. But there are things, and I keep wondering about whether there's some other magical thing. I do love woodwork, and I do a little bit of craft, and at the moment I'm sort of building some little things at the moment, or a little kit to put things together and make things out of it. So I do all that sort of stuff. But for some people, they really need to jump into something else also. Whether it be they go and work with the Lions Club, or go and do something else. I've been thinking about whether I should join the local. We have a thing called the SCS, the State Emergency Services. I can't get out on the trucks and help people in fires, but I could probably man the phones in an office or something. So, I'm just wondering whether there's something like that in communal work, because I think still being part of community is important. But for me, there's no one big thing that jumps out. It's these little things but I've got to have space to find it. There may well be something. I don't know. But, there's always limitations, whether it be financial for some people or health or whatever. But for some people, they're lucky. Yep, I know I want to do that thing. They jump into it. Heather's found that. Beautiful. She's found her Tai Chi, loves it. She's done it for several years now. She now assists her teacher by teaching some classes, and she's got her sewing. She's immersed in her sewing. It's just some wonderful stuff. So people are lucky. They find these things to absorb them.
Well, Leigh, I am just, I don't even know how to say it, but my heart is full that we've had this talk, and it doesn't matter if anybody benefits from this or not. They may, but if it doesn't, what matters is that you have had a chance to let us know that you're moving into a new phase, and we should not call you to do a bunch of work in the yoga world. And we should still call you to be your friend, your kind-hearted, lovely friend. And that's it.
I'd love to offer one final thing. Tell you, I closed my classes for many, many years. Often I've closed meetings, and it's very special to me. I do want to close with this. Try and pull it together. I honour the place in you where the entire universe resides, a place of peace and truth and of love and light, where when you are in that place in you and I'm in that place in me, we are in the same place and we are one. Namaste.
I've just finished a lovely discussion with Leigh Blashki. He was so generous and so real about what it's like to let go of your image of yourself. And I think what I'm going to do, I don't know if you all want to do this homework with me, but what I'm going to do is to ponder, to meditate, to contemplate, what will it be like when my email inbox is empty and I don't get that rush of dopamine to see all my emails and what am I going to say and do and be today? I'm going to imagine what it's going to be like when I no longer have a professional Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest account. I'm going to imagine what it's going to be like, hopefully as an old woman with gray hair and saggy body, sitting by the sea with nobody caring who I am. what is it going to be like to be with the flowers and the trees and the animals and to just to feel and be? What is it going to be like to have no schedule, nobody depending on me, nobody needing me? Gosh, the more I talk, the better this sounds. But I think, like I said, to not get those dopamine hits, to not get that social recognition, to not have anyone in the world think you're important or care about your opinion. What is that going to be like? Do we know who we will be? Will we still have those close relationships with the people that we love and they love us? I hope so. It gives me a lot of food for thought to think about the people that I want sitting with me on the beach with our saggy bodies and our wrinkly faces and our hair that we may or may not have combed. Who do I want to sit with me in those days and laugh at ourselves and not be so serious and not be quoting Yoga Sutra? I look forward to those days, but until that happens, I can't go there yet because I must support myself and stay in the householder phase. But I'm going to contemplate that between now and then, so that when I get there, it's not such a shock, because I really want to experience that phase of life fully. And then the renunciation phase, right? Which takes it even a step further. So I think we can start preparing now. And maybe after this podcast, you too will want to start preparing for your retirement, forest dwelling phase, and your sannyasa phase, your total renunciation phase. Enjoy. Thank you for listening to the Yoga Therapy Hour with Amy Wheeler podcast. Another nonprofit organization that we like to support through this podcast is the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandram in Chennai, India. They are the source for the teachings of the Optimal State Yoga Therapy School, and we are so grateful. The KYM's Mitra division offers free yoga therapy training to a large number of socially and economically underprivileged children and women in Chennai. Feel free to support them through the link listed below on Red Circle. And we also have details on our website, which is also listed below. And finally, a special thank you to our team here at Optimal State. We are truly a global family. George Mantuan, one of our executive producers. Adam Satchel, senior media producer and sound engineer from the Philippines. Krishna Panchal, a producer from Canada. Modupe Abdullahi, who does the show notes and is an editor for us from Nigeria. And Peter Morley, who wrote and produced the music for this show, who lives in Australia. Find more about Peter's work at www.zenmusic.biz. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.